All right. Hello, students of the King's University for this summer's Historical Theology course. My name is Ryan Litton, and I'm going to be the professor for this course. Just wanted to introduce myself a little bit to you. Greetings from Virginia, southwestern Virginia to be specific, in Pulaski right now in my home office, and just wanted to greet you guys and kind of let you get to know me a little bit. My bachelor's degree is from Life Pacific College, where I studied biblical studies. I also learned Greek and Hebrew there and read both of them with relative fluency. I use some resources to help me out there because I don't know that anybody's ever really fluent in either of them. My Greek professor once told us a story about Dr. Ralph Martin studying the book of Hebrews and using an interlinear. And he told us that if Dr. Martin has to use an interlinear, then it's very likely that you will always have to use an interlinear or some sort of aid. And so I tend to use Bible Web App and BibleArc.com. Both of those websites tend to be pretty helpful. Anyways, you probably notice my voice is a little strange. It's not just the accent. I'm recovering from a little bit of a cold. And so over the course of the semester, you'll probably notice that my voice changes a little bit. Hopefully that will be evidence of my recuperation. In addition, while I was at Life Pacific, I met my wife, who is the most incredible woman on the planet. And I'm not just saying that because she can hear me right now, because she's in the next room. Her name is Samantha, and with her, I have a 2-year-old son named Marshall, who is just a ball of energy that is kind of hard to manage most of the time. We are also expecting our second child, a girl. We're expecting her right around the time that this course ends, and so we're very thankful for that coincidence and timing that this course will be over right around the time we welcome her to our family. Additionally, regarding my education, I just graduated from Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary with a master's degree in Christian thought. That tends to be sort of a misnomer in that it sounds like it's a philosophy degree when it's really a degree in historical theology, which is, the focus of this course. While I've been at Gordon Conwell, I've focused on specifically the patristic era, which is the first several hundred years of the church's history. And as such, we will be focusing a good deal of our time on that era, not just because I'm most interested in the patristic era, but also most of the theological debates throughout Christian history find some sort of origin in the patristic era, and even if they don't, they tend to appeal to the patristic era for support. And so a couple of easy examples of that would be, if you're interested in the debate between Calvinist and Arminian soteriology, questions of predestination, free will, God's sovereignty, those sorts of things. Those questions were really hotly debated in the 5th century between Augustine and Pelagius and his followers. And so we find an origin of that sort of debate there. Now, that's not to say that Arminians today, whether classical or Wesleyan Arminians, are Pelagians or semi-Pelagians. I would not say that is the case. But the debate between Augustine and Pelagius are definitely relevant to that conversation about Calvinists and Arminians. In addition, Calvin, in his Institutes on Christian Religion, he appeals to the patristic era, as does Martin Luther and many of his writings, to support their perspectives. And the Counter-Reformation on behalf of the Catholic Church also appeal to the patristic era to support their ideas. And so you find often in Christian history that people are fighting over the patristic era to some degree to try to indicate that what they believe has been what the church has always believed. And so we're going to spend a little bit of extra time on the patristic era because it's my belief as a historical theologian that you will have a better understanding of the medieval Reformation, modern, and postmodern periods if you have a better understanding of the patristic period. And so we're going to spend a fair amount of time there. While I've been working on the patristic era at Gordon Conwell, I've studied with Donald Fairbairn, who is the author of one of our textbooks. This is Life in the Trinity. And this is probably one of the more influential books that I've read during my graduate work. It is very academic, but it is also very practical. And so I've assigned it in this course in the hopes that you would appreciate not only its relevance to the idea of historical theology, but also would appreciate how that study of historical theology, particularly in the patristic period, could have an impact on your devotional life as a Christian. Because I believe what Dr. Fairbairn has put forward in this book will actually deeply affect your relationship with Jesus. And so that is my hope, is that as you read it, you would be challenged, not just academically, but spiritually with regard to your life with Christ. In addition to that, the other books that we will be using, we're using Historical Theology by Alistair McGrath. And there are a lot of things in this book that I don't agree with. And hopefully you've learned at this point in your academic career that just because you disagree with someone doesn't mean that you shouldn't listen to what they have to say. And so, for instance, Dr. McGrath ends the patristic period at 451 in the Council of Chalcedon, and I would disagree with him on that, as would Dr. Fairbairn. Dr. Fairbairn ends it around 800 AD. And that's debated, and we'll talk about periods and that sort of thing later on. But that's one thing that I would disagree with. Another thing that's a little bit more substantial is Dr. McGrath spends a fair amount of time when he's talking about the patristic period. He spends a fair amount of time talking about the Alexandrian school versus the school of Antioch. And Dr. Fairbairn has actually done some scholarly writing on this topic, showing that that dichotomy doesn't really exist in the patristic period as much as we used to think it did. And so I may post a link to some of his writing so that you can consider that if you're interested. Though we've already got a fair amount of reading in the course, so I don't want to overburden you with that. But all that just to say that I'm going to disagree with Dr. McGrath when it comes to that point in the book. Nevertheless, the book is very useful. Dr. McGrath has done a great deal of work in theology and historical theology, and so definitely indebted to him for that, and very appreciative of his work. Matter of fact, the book that I initially wanted to use for this course was another one of his books, which is the Christian Theology Reader, and became aware that you guys have actually already used that in another course, and so we decided to use this one instead. But bear in mind, if you still have your copy of the Christian Theology Reader, that it may be a useful resource for you during this course as you look towards writing your research paper and that sort of thing. The primary sources that you're exposed to in the Christian Theology Reader may be very helpful to you. That said, moving on to the third book that we're going to be using, that would be The History of Christian Thought by Jonathan Hill. This, I believe, gives us a really good look into biographical information about the people that we're going to be studying, which really turns them into people instead of just sort of faceless names in history, which really helps, in my experience, for us to appreciate history when we start to understand why someone would say what they say or do what they do as an individual. It's very helpful to us. And so the book by Hill, I think, is going to be really helpful with that, with regard to helping you understand who Tertullian was and who Irenaeus was and all those sorts of things. Moving forward, talking about the course in general, we've got several things that we're going to be doing in this course, and so let's talk about that a little bit so you can appreciate what my expectations of you are. For the first category for your grade will be the reading, and we've just looked at those books. There's a fair amount of reading to be done in this course, uh, but I don't want you to be bogged down with minutia. And so as you do your reading, try to develop a sense of proportion so that you understand. For instance, I'm not interested that you know off the top of your head that Adolf von Harnack wrote History of Dogma and that is 7 volumes in the English edition. I'm more interested in Harnack's role in the rise of the discipline of historical theology. And so, if you can appreciate sort of the broad contours and the general movement of Christian thought, I'm less concerned with the details themselves, with dates and that sort of thing. I mean, it's good to know that the Council of Nicaea was in 325 and the Council of Chalcedon was in 451, But to know what led up to the Council of Nicaea and the importance of Arius's theology in the Council of Nicaea and why it's important that we accepted homoousios versus homoiousios. Those sorts of things are more important than the date itself. So I'm really looking for you to kind of grasp concepts. And so hopefully you'll do that by reading large sections rather than focusing on individual details. That's not to say that I think you should skim your reading, but just that I would hope you don't get bogged down in it and find it to be unwieldy. That if you're confused by something, make a note of it, send me a question, but move on and try to kind of get the broad picture. For your grade for reading, I'm just going to trust that you're going to be honest with me. And so each week you're going to tell me how much of your reading you've done. If you tell me you've done 70% of the reading, you'll get 70% of the points for the reading that week. I'm just going to trust that you're not going to violate your integrity for the sake of a few points. And so that's on you. And so that's how we're going to do things for the reading. For the narrated PowerPoints and videos that I'll be posting for the sake of our lectures, since we're not going to be spending time, in class per se, those will be graded the same way. You're going to tell me, I've watched all the videos for this week, I've watched all the PowerPoints for this week, that sort of thing. And I'm going to trust that if you say 100%, that is actually a representative of what you've done that week, and so then you'll get 100% of the points. The next thing that's going to be required for you in this course is forum posts. I'm not looking for specific scholarly work in the forum posts. It's sort of an informal reflection on the reading and on the narrated PowerPoints or the videos. What I'm looking for there is just sort of an interaction with the material. And so if you read something in McGrath that you disagree with, or I say something in a lecture disagreeing with McGrath, and you happen to agree with McGrath, that would be perfectly acceptable, and that would be something worth writing about. And so, so long as there's sufficient evidence that you have interacted with the material and that you are just not, throwing out sentences for the sake of trying to create content. When you write sentences to the extent of, I really like this book and it's a really good book and I enjoyed this book and I liked reading this book and you kind of go on and on and on about that sort of thing without actually saying anything, that's not going to result in a good grade. But if you can say specifically, when Fairbairn said this, whatever it happens to be, and you can give me a specific quote from Fairbairn and then respond to that, that's going to be a lot more useful for that. I'm also going to expect that you respond to one another, and so you respond to other students' posts, and then if anybody responds to your post, I expect that you would respond to that response, if that makes sense. And so bear in mind, if no one responds to you, if you make your initial post and no one has responded to you, I can't expect you to respond to nothing. And so you're not going to lose points for that. But if someone does respond to your initial post, then I would expect that you would respond back as well. And so you'll be required to make a post each week. You'll be required to respond to someone else's post each week. And then you will also be required to respond to anybody that responds to your post. And so we want to see that sort of dialogue. I'll be responding as well, and so that's how that's going to work. For the research paper, which is a significant chunk of your grade, what I would expect there is that you would find something that you're interested in, something that you're passionate about. Hopefully, in the course of your study, you have found topics and perhaps even periods in history that are fascinating to you. And what I want to see here for the research paper is that you pursue those things that you're interested in. I'm not going to give you a topic that you may find incredibly boring and then expect you to have the mental and emotional energy necessary to research that topic, given that you're not interested in it. So I want to give you some room there to develop your interests and to really find something that you want to understand. And so if that's, soteriology and the Reformation, then go for it. If I am successful in persuading you of the beauties of the patristic era, then perhaps you will decide to write about biblical interpretation in Irenaeus's On the Apostolic Preaching, or something like that. And that would be wonderful. But again, I don't want you to belabor yourself with a topic that is going to be boring for you. That's going to make for a bad paper for you, and it's going to make grading much more difficult for me. So I'm trying to make sure that everybody enjoys this class as much as they possibly can. So that's how the course is going to work in general, as far as what our coursework looks like and my expectations look like. That's kind of how this is going to work. If you have any questions, my email is on the syllabus. That's probably going to be the easiest way to get a hold of me. But my office phone number is there as well. Bear in mind I'm on the East Coast, so that's going to have some implications with regard to time zones. But I will return your call as soon as I'm able. However, email is generally going to be the easiest way to interact with one another. And so feel free to send me emails with questions, post questions in the forums, any of that sort of thing. This is a topic that I'm passionate about, and so I'm hoping that I can convey that passion to you and sort of inspire in you a desire to study the history of the church. So hopefully that over the next 7 or 8 weeks that will happen. All right. Hope you guys have a nice day.